On this episode of the Stinking Albatross Podcast.
In this country, we have an epidemic of unwanted abortions, and no one wants to address that.
And she was like, you're never going to get a law on abortion. And I said, well, you'll never be around to see it because you're so old. The best interview I ever did was with CBC in the 2019 federal election. I just was so on fire, and I answered every question, just such an attack on Trudeau. And I have never left an interview feeling so good about it, and they didn't even air 1 second. Today's episode is brought to you by Larosse Media Incorporated. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think Larosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alissa and I'm here once again with my partner in crime, Scott Hayward. How art thou, Scott?
Oh, wow. Going all English here. You know what? I had to... the day of recording this podcast is probably healthy for me because prior to recording this podcast, I was just listening. I was going through some emails and listening to the garbage bag day interviews from the Winnipeg Jets because they got reverse swept once again 2 years in a row in the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. So a lot of people out there are saying that tonight is elimination night for the Leafs. I'm still holding to my 4-3 Boston victory over the Leafs, but we'll have to in a later podcast. We'll have to go through our bracket predictions and then go to the next round.
Yeah, I think the only ones we got wrong actually so far are the Jets.
And I can't remember. Dallas is up 3-2 now. They won last night, and they're looking pretty good. Yeah. So that's 3 wins in a row for them. I think we're gonna have all our predictions correct. Well, yeah, I mean we both said that Toronto was gonna lose.
Yeah, I said they were gonna get swept.
Yeah, you said they were gonna get swept. I still think it's gonna go further. I mean, this is already game 6, right?
Yeah.
So I mean that's pretty deep. That's pretty deep in the series already. Like none of the series have gone that deep so far.
It seems that when I don't watch it, like I don't sit down in front of the TV and fully watch it, they win. It's like they know what I'm doing. So I'm not fully watching it tonight, nor would I anyway, because today is my 4th wedding anniversary. So the hubby and I are going out. And I guess this is as good a time as any before he falls asleep again to introduce Jack. He's 6 weeks old. Say hi, Jack. Hello. Oh, hello.
He's actually down. Pretty good.
It's like he has so much hair, and to me, it's sort of alarming. It kind of reminds me of when babies are born with the full set of teeth. It's just unnatural. Right. I could fully comb his hair and style it with gel if I needed to, a day after he was born. It's very weird.
Now, congratulations on your 4th wedding anniversary.
Thank you.
But let me ask you this. If, for whatever reason, in the NHL for the Stanley Cup playoffs, if they went to a 1 through 16 through the whole league playoff bracket, doesn't matter what conference you're in, division, stuff like that, and it happened to be in the first round, and it's game 6, for example, like it is tonight for the Leafs, and it happened to be Leafs versus Flames.
Yeah.
Be honest, what would you guys be doing for your anniversary tonight?
Oh, we'd definitely be watching it for sure. Or we probably would be, we would definitely go to at least one game, I think. So right. Maybe that we would just go to a game, whether it's in Toronto or Calgary, and that would be our anniversary present or whatever. But I mean, the chances of that happening are probably 1 in 10 trillion. So
yeah, I don't think the league's gonna go
we might be 85 years old when that happens.
Yeah.
So
yeah, fair enough. Jack can take you.
I thought it was so funny. Sportsnet, this guy went around at the Leafs game before that started, and he was asking people like what they thought the chances are of the Leafs winning the series. And the answers were so funny. Like everybody was like doing golf swings or saying 0. The funniest one though that somebody said was 67%.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's
But it's
also
quite enjoyable.
depressing.
Like I think probably the Leafs franchise is the funniest one. Like all the memes and like the videos and stuff, just because of their history. They're so easy to make fun of. And so is sort of Marchand and Boston to a certain extent as well. So the stuff that comes out is just, it makes me laugh every day.
That picture where he's just dumbfounded that a ref just absolutely bulldozed him and the ref's picking him up that is such a memeable little clip in time right there.
The ref like knocking him down is possibly like the funniest thing I've ever seen. And then all the like edits of it that people have done on social media just make it funnier and funnier. I'm sitting there at 3 a.m. feeding my baby, just chuckling the whole time, trying not to wake up the hubby.
What I appreciate about the Leafs fan base is that what I've noticed, at least on Twitter, which is always a very healthy place to be. Like, if you think Twitter for politics is bad, Twitter for sports fandom is so much worse.
Yeah,
so much worse.
It's true. They'll turn on you in a second.
Oh yeah, like in like Game 5 was perfect for the Leafs, right? It was they're dead to us.
Yeah.
Everything needs to be up. And then they win 2-1 or whatever it was, 3-1.
Fire everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's we're back, baby. We're going all the way.
Yeah.
SDF Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
But what I appreciate about Leafs fandom on Twitter now is that I'm not going to say they're any less serious. Like obviously they love their team like any other fandom, but they've become more I don't know, maybe lighthearted about it. Like I'll put it this way. I always think it's rude to pile on to other fans of other teams. I don't know why. I just don't. Like I'll criticize the team I'm a fan of way before I criticize another team. But Leafs fans seem to be, out of all the NHL teams I've noticed for fan bases, they seem to be nowadays the first to pile on their team before any other fan in any other market piles on their own team, or let alone the Leafs. So
yeah, we had a guy who ran for national council in Alberta. He's a big hockey guy. He didn't end up winning, but he always mocks the Leafs all the time. And he tagged me in a post the other day, like when they were about to lose. And I just posted back like this graphic that said, other NHL teams are obsessed with the Leafs, but we don't think about you at all.
Is it the Mad Men meme?
Pardon me?
Is it the Mad Men meme?
No, it was a different one, but it was just...
Oh, that would have been brilliant.
No comment, just the graphic. But yeah, the friendly banter is funny. It never gets under my skin, though, so...
No,
It is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why don't we jump into it? This is a fun idea you had for today.
Yeah, so today I thought we could do some reaction videos. I have been involved in the pro-life movement since 2010, so for almost 15 years. Scott has been close behind. When did you start? Like 2015?
2016. 2015. So this autumn is 9, so I'm not that far behind you.
Yeah, so I mean, because we've been involved in the pro-life movement for a while, we have a lot of interviews that... I mean, I probably have more comical interviews than you do, to be honest, just with my attitude and also my inexperience at the beginning and just being thrown into the pro-life movement real fast with my other job. Some of the interviews I couldn't find, and then also some reaction videos on some current political events happening, as well as some things in Hollywood. So both Scott and I found videos for each other that we haven't seen yet, so they will be blind reactions, most of them. But I'm going to start off with an interview with you, Scott, that you did with CTV, and it was live, which is the best, because you can't edit live, and that's just the most amazing part. And this interview went from sort of friendly at the beginning to like sort of hostile at the end for no reason whatsoever. I think solely because the interviewer didn't like how common sense you were. He was trying really hard to unhinge you, and it just wasn't working. And
You seem
so
like have a
anyway,
huge hate on for Andrew Shearer,
yeah, but
and
like,
decided like to take that out on me.
yeah, but like to ask you about and then oh man, we just have to watch it.
And
Let's just watch it.
you know, Andrew even texted me about it afterward. I'm like,
It's
what was
just like
that?
it's that I would highly recommend watching the whole thing. We'll watch half of it just because it is funny till the end, but let's just roll it. So there's a big middle ground out there where vast majority of Canadians are that need to be reflected in our law because, as a lot of people know, Canada's only one of 2 countries in the world that have no law whatsoever on abortion.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but there's no gray area for you, because what you're talking about is a gray area here. You know, the restrictions here, the restrictions there. You are either pro or against, and you are against abortion.
Well, if you go to our website, we have a section on our website of proposed pro-life legislation, both federally and provincially, that we think reflect the values of Canadians, the majority of Canadians, that would find broad cross-party support as well.
Like what?
Well, for example, like a ban on sex-selective abortion.
What does that mean?
So, in Canada, a lot of girls, preborn girls, are targeted in the womb simply the fact because they are girls, and they are aborted because of that.
How many? I don't know that practice exists.
I believe that there's a study out there from a couple of years ago that said in Canada there were about, over the course of 4 or 5 years, close to 5,000 girls that were targeted just because of that.
There are people who are putting an end to pregnancy because of the gender. Why is that not a big story?
I don't know. You're in the media.
Where do you get those findings, though? You say a study. What does that mean?
Well, I don't have it on me, but afterward I can link it to you, and you guys can take a look at it.
Bigger picture, though, what I'm saying is that, there is a gray area here, but I don't think there's any gray area for you.
Well, we want to make sure that laws are passed that reflect the values of Canadians, particularly on our issue. To go from having absolutely no law whatsoever into some sort of law, there is a big middle ground there that I think that an organization, a lot of other pro-life organizations out there in Canada today, think that there would be broad, political support on.
Where did you come to this conclusion for your own being anti-abortion? Where did this come from?
Well, when I was younger, I grew up in a very pro-life family, and then, being born in the 90s, of course, you grew up in a very secular environment. And so what I wanted to do was, if I want to successfully argue this issue, I need to look at the science of the issue. And then when I delved into the science of the issue, the embryology, the biology of it, it became very clear to me personally that the science of behind when life begins, and the defense of it, and the extension of human rights to preborn girls and boys, to me was very simple, and that's what got me into it.
You say pro-life, I would imagine you're also religious, raised very religiously. Are you a Catholic?
Yeah, I come from a practicing Catholic family, a practicing Catholic myself.
So let me ask you this question. Do you think that religion trumps human rights, the right to choose?
Well, I think that, the preborn girls and boys that are in the womb, the science behind it is that they are clearly human beings in early stages of development. And the fact that they are human beings in early stages of development, human rights should be extended to them.
Human rights should be extended. So you see the human rights extended to the womb as opposed to a woman's right to choose.
I think that the right to life is a very important right. If we want to talk about rights in general, it's very difficult to have other rights if you don't have a right to life. And I think there are a lot of policies and laws out there that can both, protect preborn girls and boys, as well as to support women.
Out of curiosity, are you anti-gay marriage or pro-gay marriage?
For our organization, that's not an issue. Our organization is focused. Well, I think personally, it doesn't really reflect, what we're here discussing today as well. Our organization is solely focused on the issues of abortion and assisted suicide.
Let me ask you this question: if you have children one day and they turn out to be gay, and they say, "Dad, will you come to my wedding?" Would you go?
I think that's something that needs to be discussed between. Just got recently engaged, my fiance and myself. But in regards to the election coming up, we're focused on nominating and electing as many pro-life politicians as possible that are pro-life when it comes to the issues of abortion and assisted suicide. So I just think that interview is so funny because it weirdly enough, like shortly after this happened, this guy left his family and came out of the closet, right?
It was beforehand.
Oh,
yeah,
it was beforehand.
Actually, what happened was I had left that interview, and I did some research on him, basically right away when I got back, and it didn't take very long. It took about 20 minutes to find out. He had worked for another media company down in Los Angeles or something like that, and he was married with kids, and he had recently left his wife. I don't know if the divorce proceedings were final or not, for another man, and she obviously wasn't happy with that. I think he was, maybe still is, estranged from his children. So obviously, like, it was a very personal issue
Yeah,
for
that's what I
him.
find amusing
My
because
the thing I was most taken aback about in that interview was when I said, "Oh, hey, I recently got engaged," because I literally got engaged
yeah.
like a few days before that. There was like no reaction from him. There was no like, "Oh, hey, congratulations," or "That's great news." He couldn't give less of a shit.
Yeah, like
that I was
he was
engaged.
trying to project, he was trying to say, oh, your personal opinions don't trump human rights, but it's like he was trying to project his personal opinions on you out of nowhere. Like, that's not even what the interview was about.
No, that's I still have the email from CTV when they asked me to do an interview. But what I really learned from that interview was, with these larger legacy media outlets, is to do always do them live,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we have the experience, specifically you, Alissa, of whenever we deal with Radio Canada, it's always awesome because they always just put it raw and they
Yeah.
never put like any commentary on it or anything like that. I think they're fantastic that way. But with CTV, after that, they asked me to do another interview for the federal election campaign, because the idea was they wanted me to do this interview there in Ottawa, maybe like a month, not even, before the federal election campaign began in 2019. And then CTV asked me to do another one in October, I believe, before election day. And I told them I will only do it live. And
Yeah.
so I did it live.
Yeah.
And for this, for this very reason. But
And then
yeah, like for
also,
example, like, whenever you get asked to do interviews with CBC or whatever, they always record them. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the reporters and the journalists are always fantastic, and they're extraordinarily apologetic because their editors always cancel it. So now we only do interviews live.
the best interview I ever did was with CBC in the 2019 federal election. I just was so on fire, and I answered every question, just such an attack on Trudeau. And I have never left an interview feeling so good about it, and they didn't even air 1 second of it.
No.
It was so unfortunate. But I also find it really amusing in a negative sort of way that this guy has no idea what sex-selective abortion is. Like, no freaking clue. He wants to go live on an interview with someone about the issue of abortion and doesn't know, like, one of the main issues that Canada has faced in the last few years. Because it wasn't just a study, it was like a huge deal that the Canadian Medical Association came out with.
Yeah.
This expose that this is happening regularly, and it's happening more in Canada than in most other countries. So it's just crazy that he has just no freaking clue, yet he has such strong opinions on it, clearly.
Yeah, I don't think he stayed at that position for much longer. I don't think he's. I mean, I could be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure he moved on from CTV Morning Live fairly quickly after.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larossemedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Okay, so the next clip is from 2012, I believe, and it's with a program that I don't think is on the air anymore. It's called Square Off, and it was on Hamilton CHCH. And they had us on a couple times. Also, as a side note, one of my favorite interviews that Jonathan Van Maren has ever done is on this program. If you haven't Googled it or seen it, you have to. He is staring at the host like he wants to murder them with daggers in his eyes. and it's just absolutely lethal, and he does a really good job, but he eviscerates them, and it's one of the best interviews, and it always makes me laugh, but also pumps me up at the same time. So definitely Google that. But I was on in 2012 because former MP Maurice Vellicott gave Linda Gibbons and Mary Wagner a Diamond Jubilee medal that each MPs were allowed to give people that they thought, offered something in society, like a positive role model in society. And so, of course, the mainstream media and the abortion activists were absolutely hysterical over this. For those of you who don't know Linda Gibbons and Mary Wagner, basically, Linda never listens to bubble zones in front of abortion clinics, so she'll just hold a placard and stand inside the bubble zone quietly. She never speaks, but she breaks the bubble zone, and she's regularly arrested. And then Mary goes one step further, and she goes into the abortion clinic waiting rooms and hands out roses or presents to the girls in the waiting rooms, and tries to convince them out of going through with their appointment, and is usually arrested fairly quickly. It's also quite talented that Mary's able to do this, because it is very difficult to get into an abortion clinic. Like, they have cameras everywhere. They have to let you in. You have to have an appointment. So she, for her to actually even enter the waiting room is a feat in of itself. But I've actually physically been with Mary a few times when this has happened, and I've seen girls walk out with roses who've told me that they've canceled their appointments. So I do know that this works, and I think I say this in the interview, but this is early on in my career because I started in 2010. This was in 2012. So I had done some interviews, but I had a whole lot of attitude that I still have a whole lot of attitude, but I wasn't able to get a hold of it quite as well as I do now. And Susan Cole, she was the editor of a popular magazine in Toronto called Now. And before this interview happened, she came in before the cameras were rolling, and she was just so angry and chirping me, and I was chirping her back, and she was like, you're never gonna get a law on abortion. And I said, well, you'll never be around to see it because you're so old. Like that. Like, it was very intense, to the point where after the interview, I actually settled down and thought about it a little bit more, and I emailed her and I just said, I apologize for any rude comments that I made, and she never responded. But yeah, it was definitely tense. But yeah, let's just roll some of these clips here, and we'll see. Have you seen this interview, Scott?
I believe I have, yeah.
Okay, just a long time ago.
Yeah, exactly.
They are, first of all, breaking it consistently, showing contempt for the law, consistently fighting with police. And it's not like Martin Luther King, who went and stayed and did civil disobedience in order to have police officers, drag off protesters off the streets. These are women who are going in and harassing other women. And I think this is a very important point. They're not just staying out there on the street, seizing public space. They're going in to harass women who are in crisis themselves, often traumatized by the choice they're making, but feel the need to make that choice. And by the way, the choice is to have control over your own body.
Except and that is in the womb, right?
And it was precisely because of the harassment nature of the particular so-called protest that was what was vexing the law at that time.
Actually, Mary or Linda have never been charged with harassment. It's either public trespassing. I'm also going to say I have personally been with Mary on regular occasions when she does enter these clinics. I've been standing outside, and a baby was actually saved because a woman saw the violent nature of the police.
Alyssa, I don't think we want to argue about the past so much as talking about what do we do going forward. Let's step back from the issue itself and talk about what the criteria is for getting one of these Diamond Jubilee medals and its significant contribution to a particular province or the country. Morgentaler actually changed the laws. So he had a lasting impact on what happened in Canada, and that's probably why he was acknowledged.
Well, how would you know that Mary
can I just ask you what you think the significant contribution, the lasting impression these women have left? What change have they actually made to deserve the award?
Well, I mean, obviously time will tell. And with regards to the injunction, Linda Gibbons prays outside of various clinics with a temporary injunction that was put on over 20 years ago. So that's a whole other issue with regards to...
No, but I want to know what tangible evidence is that they've made a change and a real contribution to the country?
I would say saving people's lives. Like I was saying, Pat, in the past, Mary went into a clinic, and because the police were so violent towards her that a woman actually was sickened by this hostility towards another woman, and she left the clinic and she actually gave birth to her baby.
And
so Mary's saved lives. Linda has saved repeated lives.
No, it wasn't Mary's actions
and
that saved the law.
Well.
It wasn't Mary's actions that
Well,
saved the
that's
law.
what she says,
It
so
was
it's
the
her word
police
against yours.
actions.
All right,
No,
one
it was
at a
the
time.
police actions that saved, and it wasn't even Mary's arguments about the nature, the fetus and whether it was life or not that changed it or not. And I think the lasting impact on the country is a really important thing to mention.
I've physically been there. Mary has roses, and she hands out roses to the patients.
But that wasn't what she was charged with at that time.
And when she does hand out roses, I've physically seen women leaving the clinic with a rose saying they're not going to go through with their abortion because they
All right,
spoke to Mary.
Alissa, you said time will tell. When Liz asked you about, why are these women getting these medals, you said time will tell. Why should we not wait? Let's wait. Okay, and then when time, and if time does tell that what these women are doing is of the same benefit as what Mr. Morgentaler did in changing the law, maybe then we can award them the Diamond Jubilee Medal. But not now, because, as you say, they're still in this process. They're not yet at this greatness point that you believe that they will be at some time. Why don't we just wait?
Well,
Why give them the awards now?
Well, first of all, changing the law doesn't necessarily mean you haven't done anything. Like I said, they've saved people's lives. Secondly, it's up to Mr. Vellacott who he wants to give the award to. There is no stipulations in the guidelines that they couldn't give them out to people who may have been convicted in the past. So he's not doing anything wrong or breaking any rules. So it's really up to him. And I do think that saving people's lives is a significant contribution to society.
Well, my issue isn't that they haven't been convicted, is that they've been convicted. I mean, I don't care that they've been convicted. There may be some people who, even Morgentaler was convicted at some point. The question is, have they made a lasting impact? And I want to talk too about, when you're talking about that you've been there a couple of times where women have left the clinic, the truth of the matter is that the protests outside the clinics have been have had more traumatic effect often on the women who are seeking the medical attention to which they are legally
Says who? You?
Not me. Having talked to women
Well, I
who
have.
were furious, who had their lives disrupted while they were getting the medical attention that they were legally able
So
to
praying
get.
is prohibiting them from getting medical
Okay.
attention.
Praying.
I'm not
I have
really
no
sure.
Ladies.
problem. I have no problem with people
Ladies.
standing outside on the other side of the street and praying. Stay out of the clinics.
Okay, all right, Susan G. Cole, Alissa Golub, thank you for joining us.
I wonder if that still be her position today, Susan Cole. Like if she would be against the bubble zone law.
Oh, I'm sure. Like she's super radical. I do want to mention though, and this has happened to me a couple times, is that I actually didn't in my mind, I wasn't interrupting the host because there was a delay. So I hate that because it looks like I'm being really aggressive, but it seemed like there was a pause or silence and it was my turn kind of thing. I remember that being a thing when I was watching it back, and it's just like, oh, but she really had me on edge, but I'm sure she has the same position. And I think at the end, you could tell she was sort of like getting riled up as well.
Yeah, you were finally getting under her skin, but yeah.
But I hate how they just make these accusations like this is traumatizing to women. Like who? How do you, who is saying that? Like that is pure conjecture. Women oftentimes either if they're going to go through with their appointment, they just ignore Linda or Mary. And if they are really hesitant and don't want to go through with the abortion appointment, they'll talk to them and leave the clinic. Like, how is it? If you have seen Mary or Linda, to say that women are traumatized by the sight of them or their actions is hilarious.
Yeah.
Linda's a little old grandma who's the sweetest, kindest lady who doesn't utter a single word to anyone as they leave or come out. Mary is the quietest, most saint-like creature I've ever seen in my life. Very soft-spoken, very, just angelic in her demeanor. Like she just is non-confrontational, speaks very kindly, respects your space. So it's just like, Susan Cole is 1,000 times more traumatizing in this interview than those two girls women put together.
I've had supper with Mary Wagner once before at a private residence of a supporter of ours, and it was very, in some ways, it was very unsettling. I'm not going to say disturbing. Disturbing is not the right word, but it was very unsettling to me because it was like, I feel like I'm dining with probably someone, like I'm not a judge of her soul. I don't sit on the awesome tribunal of Christ. But I feel like I'm dining with someone that when she dies, she's probably immediately going to heaven. You know what I mean? Like that's the aura that she gives off, and it's so natural with her. It's so natural that it's supernatural.
Yeah. I know it sounds like we're
very,
describing someone, like it sounds weird how we're describing her, but if you actually meet her, you'll understand. You're like, oh, okay.
And so my point being is like when if I've never been there when she's gone into an abortion clinic to speak with these women, but given the fact that I just had that supper with her that one time, and there was a few other people there as well, but it was an intimate setting. There was like 4 or 5 of us. If you're one-on-one with her in a clinic, it's like it's like, okay, I'm just comparing it because I just watched the film on Good Friday, like I always do on most Good Fridays. It reminds me of the Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, where Barabbas is being released, and he looks at the face of Christ, and he kind of like has like a second look, because there's just this aura, right? There was also some whatever in the Palace of Herod earlier in the film, where they look at the face of Christ, and again they feel ashamed because it was just basically this giant sex palace. I would think that Mary would have that effect. Maybe not women necessarily feeling shame, but probably like a calmness and a second guessing. I mean, I don't know, Alyssa. I haven't been there, but like I can only imagine. And so to say that like they're traumatized, I wouldn't say they're traumatized. No. I would say that their lives are probably changed forever and for the better. Having that experience with her.
Man, I have so many, like we could probably do a podcast on the stories I have about these two women because I have such intimate experiences with them, but I will share a couple. The first is that the very first time I ever went to Mary to an abortion clinic was the day before Christmas Eve. It was the stark contrast with Christmas coming up and her going to an abortion clinic was not lost on me. And she actually got me to call the clinic to see if they were open because she was wondering, like, are these places open the week of Christmas or during the holidays or whatever? So I called the clinic the day before Christmas Eve and said, hey, are you guys open? And they said, yeah, but don't bother coming in. We're booked solid. So I guess like people wanted their holiday abortions prior to Christmas, but so that was like very disturbing to me. And then the second story that I will share, and you can find this online as well, is that one of the other times that I was with Mary, like I mentioned, the police. They often come the first time, and then she talks to them, and the police say, don't go back in, and they give her a warning. Then they leave, and then Mary goes back in because the police aren't, her judge, basically. And so she goes back in, and then when they come back out, she doesn't fight them to leave the clinic, but she just sort of goes limp, like she makes it harder for them to force her out of the clinic. And so anyway, I was outside and I was videotaping this, and this was like before you could film on your phone. It was like those digital cameras that I was recording on. And the policeman came over and said, can I see that and I handed him over my camera, and he proceeded right in front of me very directly to delete every single video and photo that I had of them doing this to her. And during the whole time I was said, why are you doing this? Am I doing something illegal? He wasn't answering. What's your badge number? What's your name? Wasn't answering. And so I ended up filing I ended up filing a complaint with the Toronto Police, and it took like months and months and months. And one of the HR guys or whatever called me, tried to convince me out of doing it. I said, no, I don't care how long it takes. I'm doing it. 6 months goes by. And they finally say we have we did an investigation and we have the results that we want to share with you. This police officer lost a day of work based on his interactions with you because we found that what he did was mostly valid. He said that he was looking at your camera to examine whether or not it was a weapon and accidentally deleted your footage.
Yeah, lesson learned. Never ever hand it over.
Oh my goodness. Like now with all the crazy protests and everything, like people, and there's a million cameras everywhere. Like I can't imagine that happening, especially with like the touchiness that people have with the police. But I just, that story will, stay with me forever. And I also, with just a quick Linda story, is that I used to run an internship at Campaign Life Coalition, and I would get different speakers to come in and speak to the interns. So I would always get Linda. And she had so many stories of her because the women in jail, because Linda would spend years and years and years in jail, because every time that they would want to release her, one of the stipulations would be you can't go back to the clinic and hold your placard out in front, and she would say no. Like I can't say that I'm not going to do that. So she would just be in jail, sometimes indefinitely. And so the women in jail loved her, and she was like their mommy in jail. And she led this Bible study in jail, she said once, and different girls joined. And one time at lunch, one of the girls in her Bible study was just eating her lunch, and a woman came over and said, "You're in my spot." And the girl, said, "No, I'm not." And so the woman took this girl and started smashing her head against the floor. And Linda said you could like hear her skull like cracking. It was really disturbing. And when she let go, the woman stood up and turned around and hugged her. Like the woman who was beating her skull against the ground. And that was the end of it. And then both women joined the Bible study. Like the other woman joined the Bible study later on. But that was just like an interesting story. But there also have been lots of stories of women who are pregnant in jail who haven't had abortions or had coerced abortions through the jail because Linda was there and talked them through it and got them outside help and that kind of thing. So I'm sure that there's so many things that we don't even know about that they've accomplished in their life. Yes. But back to the interview, I would definitely not do an interview like that today, obviously. Sometimes
but you would still do that. Take that
for
interview.
Sure. Just not
you wouldn't do it in that way.
To just see the head.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, it was trial by fire for me. I did an interview with MTV. It was one of my first ones. And it's so awkward and it's hard to watch. But I was the only pro-life voice. So, you have to learn real quick how to do these things because there's not too many people who can do them. And so as much as I regret some of my style, I definitely don't. It's definitely led me to where I am today, and which is basically being censored by all mainstream media. So.
Yeah.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Okay, let's go back to one of yours.
Sure.
You were kind of mentioning this story, but I haven't seen this video of the Toronto Star.
Yeah. Okay. Let's watch this one.
So yeah, let's do this one. I haven't.
Not good, but like interesting.
There was a lot of physical abuse with punching and hitting us and pulling our hair and dragging us to our rooms. Not allowing us to do anything, participate in other things other girls were doing. And it was all petty little things. We were young teenagers. We did petty little stupid things. I don't know, I don't remember how. Maybe because I was getting sick. How they found out I was pregnant. I didn't even know I was pregnant. Didn't know. So I couldn't keep that baby. So they brought me to Toronto. And because I was so far gone, they couldn't give me a regular, normal. Now, I wouldn't have known this at the time. When I got older, I realized that they couldn't give me a regular D&C. The baby was too far in. So they stuck this silver prod into my stomach and to induce the labor and kill the baby. I think the worst part was you actually go into labor. You actually go into labor, and they don't come in there. They don't come in there and help you. They don't do nothing. The girl beside me kept ringing her buzzard, and I gave birth to this baby. It was laying right there, blood everywhere, and they left me like that. Not for real long, but they left me like that. You have to sit there with blood and a dead baby. The nurse comes in and she grabs it, grabs all the blankets, the sheets, takes my sheets, takes the baby out, like she's been doing this 100 times a day. Through my whole life, my whole entire life, I've talked to people about this. People of power, psychiatrists, doctors, and nobody would do nothing. Nobody would do a fucking thing. And they look at you and they act like you're a liar. And there's so many of us, I know so many kids, not just in my reform school. A lot of these kids came from Hamilton, believe it or not. And I still know them to this day. I know ones that were abused, and it has changed them, like me.
What's a reform school?
Yeah, so like I came across this last night. That was the first thing, which is Pine Ridge, not reform school.
Like this wasn't a residential
training school. Yeah, so I looked it up, and in the province of Ontario, starting I think in the 40s or the 50s, the Progressive Conservative government, which was in power for like 40 years straight in Ontario, they created these schools that were basically like juvenile centers for troubled kids, troubled teens. Some of them were camps. Some of them were like full-on schools. I saw that David Sweet did a video because apparently he attended one. I don't know what he said in the video because I haven't actually watched through it. David Sweet's a former pro-life member of Parliament from the Flamborough area. Yeah, and apparently there were a lot of issues. There was a big lawsuit from former students against these schools, obviously from that woman's story when she was a young woman. And it sounds like a lot of issues that probably occurred around the same time that in residential schools across Canada. So it sounds like a similar thing, but I do want to talk about the content of the video. But to me, Alissa, this is what was really interesting. So you asked me to find some videos about social issues, and I decided, I don't know about you, like I don't know all your videos, but for me, I decided to stick to abortion. I feel like, you know, on the transgender issues dealing with children in schools, like the culture's moving on that quite a bit, politically starting to move, and that's great. And it still, from my personal perspective, needs to move a little bit further. But it's great. You know, I think the culture and the population, the electorate's moving on assisted suicide politically. That needs to move a little bit more too, but it's going in the right direction. But abortion still kind of seems to me, in Canada at least, still stuck in the same place. With there quite hasn't been that movement that we've seen on those two other issues. So all my videos are on abortion. So when I was looking them up, you know, CBC, CTV, Global, Toronto Star, like they all have videos on abortion related topics. Some of them not necessarily from the perspective I share, some of them from the perspective I share. Like, for example, I would say this video that we just watched, and this is from, you know, Legacy Media. And then I look up, you know, abortion videos on, you know, Western Standard, basically nothing. I look up abortion videos on True North Center, besides the Andrew Lawton stuff that he incorporates in a lot of his podcasts and shows, nothing. I look up abortion-related topics on The Rebel, besides Adam Seuss doing one or two videos in the last couple of years. Nothing from The Rebel on a consistent basis since, you know, 4, 5, 6 years ago. What I found interesting, Alissa, to me, was, why is it that this legacy media that apparently a lot of pro-lifers hate, and probably sometimes because of the people they have on, why is it that they're providing content on this? Not necessarily always in the same perspective that we share, but sometimes is. But an independent, quote unquote, conservative media, completely silent on it, hardly able to find anything, or at least anything recently, especially compared to legacy media. Like this Toronto Star video, I found that to be very powerful. I hope that people who are watching this for that video for the first time share that experience as well. Why isn't, True North Center going in and doing something like that? Like, how many videos are you going to make about the bloody carbon tax? Why don't you actually do human videos on stuff like this? Good on the Toronto Star. Good on the Toronto Star for doing a video like that and talking about that issue.
Yeah, a couple things strike me about this video. The first is that despite the fact that this is about a forced abortion and not really about, a quote unquote woman's right to choose, the fact that abortion comes down to is the same, and that if abortion isn't killing a human, then why is it so traumatic, right? Like, if you got like a forced tooth removed or whatever, would that be as traumatic as a forced abortion? Of course not. So even by just showing how traumatic it was, shows that abortion does do something to women psychologically, and it does do something to their child. Like, to say baby and full of blood and the body and everything, that's not an organ. That's not a potential human being. That is a human being. And that's an extremely sad story. And I'm sure that woman will have that trauma for the rest of her life. And there's a lot of people that need to answer for that, for sure. But, there is a cognitive dissonance in society that tells you that a forced abortion, is wrong, but a woman who chooses that is right, because the end result is the same.
Yeah, it's a very raw video. Frankly, I would have loved to see more of it. I've never heard of this before, and this is something that I think we as a movement should delve more into, because I think I remember during the two leadership campaigns that Leslie Lewis ran in 2020 and 2022, she had the same pro-life platform in both of them, which I thought was a reasonable and great platform. She said that, as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, she would seek to do 4 things. Number 1 is to defund abortions overseas. Number 2 is to criminalize, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically to regulate and disallow sex selective abortion. Number 3 was to support people who help women in crisis pregnancies, specifically crisis pregnancy centers. And number 4 was one that a lot of people said was her weakest. I kind of thought it was her strongest, and that was to amend the criminal code to make coerced abortions illegal. And coercion into abortion happens in a variety of ways. It's not as brutal and physical as what happened to this Mary Soretti woman when she was a young woman in the training school, but it could be specific comments made by healthcare professionals, by doctors, by sometimes parents, by employers, and women need protection from that, and most especially their children. And if you're coercing someone to make the decision by threats or incredible undue pressure to kill a little preborn girl, preborn boy, I think there should be consequences in the criminal code for that. Absolutely. So, and this video is just a perfect example of why that needs to be in the criminal code.
Yeah, I mean, one of the best quotes I ever heard was a speaker who said that when you ask women why they chose abortion, they say that they thought they had no other choice.
Yeah.
Choice is an illusion oftentimes when it comes to abortion. There's coercion, there's guilt, there's so many other factors at play, and it's usually never a woman's free choice to go and do this, because a woman doesn't want to go do this. Our inclinations and our intuition is that when we're pregnant, we know that that we're pregnant with the baby, and we know that if we have an abortion, that ends the life of a baby. As someone who's been pregnant multiple times, who's currently holding a newborn baby in my arms, that's very true. No woman wants to get an abortion, so why don't we talk about unwanted abortions and not unwanted pregnancies? Because
Exactly.
there's no such thing
Yeah,
as
our good friend Jonathan Van Maren talks about that a lot, right? Like in this country, we have an epidemic of unwanted abortions, and no one wants to address that federally or provincially. I mean, our job is to change that, and I believe that we're well on our way. But I like, first off, there's not enough study that goes into it. Statistics Canada isn't required to track enough data on this, but I would be tremendously curious as to how many women procure an abortion in this country, one of hundreds of thousands of each year, actually want to make that decision. Obviously, there are women out there that do, unfortunately, and I still think that should be disallowed because you are ending the life of a preborn girl or boy. But we should find out and really delve into, how, like, what is the percentage of women of the 100,000 abortions every year in Canada that don't want to do this? Why do they feel that they have to? And address that either in legislation or in public policy.
And every time there's an Unborn Victims of Crime Act sort of bill that goes through Parliament, there are websites dedicated to the dozens and dozens of women who have been killed by a spouse or an abusive boyfriend or husband or whomever because they refused to get an abortion, and yet Parliament still refuses to act. They say, oh, we have laws against this. Well, if we had actual effective laws against this wouldn't keep happening, because there was a recent case even after C-311 where this happened, of a guy who just got out of jail and murdered his pregnant girlfriend or wife. I can't remember which it was. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely something that, the small fringe minority, using Justin Trudeau's terminology, says coerced abortion will lead to restrict or criminalize coerced abortion will lead to restricting all abortion. Well, not necessarily. There's a lot of people who would identify as pro-choice or in favor of a woman's right to choose who are against coerced abortion. So the fact that Parliament is so offside with the public on that, again, is jarring, and it's something that I think the Parliamentary Pro-Life Caucus and Conservatives in general should definitely focus on, because again, it's a winning issue, and it's not just a winning political issue like a virtue signal. It's something that would actually change people's lives and help them for the better.
Yeah, I know we're pretty hard on Pierre Poilievre on this podcast because he is not pro-life, and he had a perfect pro-life voting record until he decided he wanted to run for leader and decided that he was going to switch to become more pro-abortion. But I will say this, under his leadership, when the last unborn victim of crimes piece of legislation was put forward in the House of Commons, I believe last year, every single member of the Conservative Party of Canada who was present in the House of Commons, which was, 115 out of the 120 or whatever it was, voted for that piece of legislation, including Pierre himself. So there has been movement for sure. It's baby steps, and we need those steps to be bigger and faster. There's no doubt about it. But there has, even under someone like Pierre Poilievre, there has been movement within the Conservative Party of Canada, and that's speaks to the work that we do at RightNow to getting good, solid people in places like the Parliamentary Pro-Life Caucus. I mean, we're focusing on nominations coming up this year, and the point is that when we come across stories like this, and when we come across issues like what happened to this Mary Soretti woman, we need to have a good cadre of MPs in there to actually address it in a substantive manner. Why don't we do one final one, Alissa? Because I feel like for like these, 2, 3, maybe 4 minute clips, we're talking like 15 minutes each, about 2 or 3, 4 minutes. But I guess that's part of a reaction video. So
yeah,
anyway, why don't we do one more?
I'm gonna play a final video. It is from an older season of Love is Blind, and I know that probably most people have seen this, but I want to play it anyway. It's from 2022, but Love is Blind is a very popular show that's still going on and just increases in its viewership, and there have been quite a few abortion stories this was one argument or discussion that a couple had about abortion. I think it was the first season, speaking of coerced abortions, one of the girls said that she had a coerced abortion and it affected her very deeply and that she would never, ever go through that again. And she was one of the girls that actually said yes and got married, and they're still married to this day. But her kind of trauma and her reliving that a couple times throughout the season was, I think, very powerful. So yeah, there have been quite a few different side stories about this issue, but this one in particular I think is fairly poignant. So let's just watch this clip of Love is Blind a couple years ago.
Your child had a birth defect and you could abort the pregnancy, but so you want to keep the baby? Keep the baby? What the yeah. I think it's different for me. I've seen so much in my field. A lot of time, even just with Down syndrome, there's so many complications, medical and also learning complications. For me, if I knew that I could try again and hope that the second time it's better, then I would go that route, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah.
I could never do that, but especially knowing that we were trying to have a kid, just abort mission because they're going to have some challenges.
Yeah, so I think, I think Love is Blind has kind of gotten worse and worse over the years, but I think that this is a true depiction of what couples actually have to go through and talk about, like these issues. And this is something that I always tell my brothers, because I have 5 brothers and they're all very handsome.
Especially that Joe. He's a good looking one.
Yeah, so I have 5 brothers and they are all very good looking. They are very lucky in the lady department. One of my brothers is married, so I guess I have 4 eligible bachelor brothers. Well, some are dating still. But I always tell them, like, before you get married, have these conversations with your spouse or with your significant other, because once you're married, like, it could go downhill fast. Like, say you do have a Down syndrome baby, or where do they stand on gender ideology or things like that. Like, it's very important because especially with those issues, men have way less of a say than women. And courts often side rule with, the women on these issues. Or even the person who wants the transition or wants the abortion and not the alternative, which would be my brothers. So I think this is a very realistic depiction of what conversations couples have. And I think that I really like the guy's reaction. Like, what the hell? What are you even talking about? Like, how is this even a belief that people have? And that is the correct reaction. She's basically saying, yeah, like, they'll have learning challenges. Like, great. People who don't have Down syndrome have learning challenges. What a stupid comment. But I think that also Love is Blind was trying to conversely depict the guy as, like, the villain. But I think a lot of people... I can't imagine the majority of people watching that and siding with her.
Yeah, no, exactly. And he was very, very supportive of any future child that they have that would have any sort of issue. Very protective, like a father properly should be, with his children. And like Down syndrome people are like the most joyful, the most happy. I'm not saying they don't have emotions. Like, obviously they have emotions like anyone else, but there are challenges with Down syndrome children, and then as they get older, people as well. But for the people I know that have a Down syndrome member in their family, they universally, right across the board, all say that it's a blessing. And you can tell when you're talking to them, they're not just saying that just to say it. But they truly, truly mean it. It is interesting how I think in this country that disability rights groups, regardless of where they were, 10, 15 years ago, are now more and more into our camp on the pro-life side, specifically when it comes to the issues of abortion and assisted suicide. Whenever there's an amendment to the criminal code dealing with assisted suicide in the House of Commons over the past number of years, increasingly there are more and more disability rights groups that are coming to the House saying that, the people that we represent and the people that we advocate for, these are the people that are going to get preyed upon the very first when you expand the criteria for assisted suicide more and more. There's a piece of legislation. I can't remember. I don't think it was passed. There was because I believe the Parliament died, but there was a piece of legislation in the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, introduced by an NDP MPP, mind you. So there you go. Again, Conservatives failing at the helm. That basically called for if a couple had if a woman was pregnant and that woman had not a diagnosis, but the doctor basically came in and said, yeah, the child that you're carrying is likely going to have Down syndrome or some other quote unquote, malformality, like some sort of issue, that healthcare professionals would not be allowed to recommend abortion, terminating the pregnancy. And I believe that if the woman had requested an abortion, that there would have to be a mandatory 72-hour waiting period and psychological counseling offered to her and her husband and the family for that. And that's from an NDP MPP. I mean, how many people, like, first off, a lot of those, I don't know if you could call, I'm not a medical professional. I don't know if you can call them diagnoses, because a lot of the time they're wrong, right? A lot of the time, 5 months in or whatever, they'll do the blood test or whatever it is for the baby. They'll come back and they'll say, oh, looking at the scans and everything, looks like your kid's going to have Down syndrome. So do you want to abort? And the do you want to abort part comes very heavily from the physician and the nurses and the healthcare aides and whatever else that are part of the system. And a lot of times when people say no, not all the time, and I don't know what the percentage is, I would love to know it. But a lot of the times there are stories out there where actually there was nothing wrong with the child at all. And it's a perfectly normal, healthy baby that's delivered, a few months later at 9 months.
My mom was told that my brother Patrick was going to have Down syndrome. And he was born and did not, in fact, have Down syndrome. So he goes around telling people that he had Down syndrome, but he got over it.
He cured himself. But even then, like, Down syndrome, like, you don't really need to be cured of it. Like, I sometimes wonder that, we only have 2 kids thus far, and God willing, if it's this will, we'll have more. And if we got that news that, like, oh, hey, your child is going to have Down syndrome or likely to have Down syndrome, and let's say, my wife did deliver a child that does have Down syndrome, what would my reaction be? And my interaction with people who have Down syndrome thus far has been very pleasant, and I feel like would be one of our, not that you have favorites of kids, but like a really good kid. And
yeah, my husband works with.
Cross that bridge when we come to it, if we do come to it. But I just this whole conversation about Down syndrome makes me. Do you ever watch the comedian Shane Gillis?
No.
Okay, he has members of his family. Like, he has an uncle in particular that has Down syndrome, and people that have Down syndrome, have a bit of a specific facial look. And he kind of has that look as well, so he kind of plays that up in his comedy. But I don't know, I like it because in his comedy he incorporates that these are just normal people that live normal lives and often are a lot better than a lot of people that we know in terms of their personality. And that clip kind of reminded me of that. Is I think that, I can't speak for him, but I think that if Shane didn't have his uncle, like, he'd be devastated.
Yeah, I mean, my husband works for a company that houses adults with disabilities and addictions. And when he first started, like 25 years ago, he was very close to becoming the guardian of a man there who had Down syndrome, because he was he didn't have very many people in his life, and he was such a joy, and really grew attached to my husband and vice versa. And it didn't end up happening, but he'll tell you stories of the different people who have come through and how amazing and joyful they spread their love towards others in the house and are really positive people to have around, and it's just so devastating, I think, to people not just with Down syndrome but any type of disability, to watch somebody on television or in the mainstream media say, yeah, if I was pregnant with you, you would be dead. That's just extremely heartbreaking, and it's not something that we as a society should be promoting, let alone allow happening.
Yeah, I like to think that most Canadians are on board with this, right? And I think pieces of legislation like that save lives of, like, first off, a child in the womb is automatically already vulnerable, right? Like in the most extreme state. And then to add a layer of vulnerability to that child, if you have some sort of disability, like these are the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable. And these pieces of legislation provincially addressing this, like literally target to protect the most vulnerable people and members of our society. And I like to think that most Canadians would be on board with that. Just like I think most Canadians are on board with, we should not allow, or should we not target, and medical professionals should not encourage people with disabilities to seek out medical assistance in dying, should seek out physician-assisted suicide. So, yeah, that's thanks for sharing that video. I know that the abortion discussion happens in later seasons of Love is Blind, because my wife and I have watched at least one season. I don't know if we'll watch more, but
I actually have a crew of friends that we watch it together. Like, we have watch parties.
It becomes very addicted, very addicting very quickly. We have a dear friend of ours, my wife and I, back in Hamilton. They're actually moving right away, and she's actually been a longtime supporter of RightNow, like well before we met her and became friends with her and her husband. And she's a psychologist, a counselor. And when we're watching Love is Blind, I'd always, like, we pause so many times when we watch that show to discuss what we just witnessed. And I always say to my wife, we have to contact Sam. We have to contact Sam, and we need, like, professional advice on, like, what is wrong with this person, like what kind of condition is this? Because a lot of them are kind of not great people. A lot of them are just normal people, and like, and they get married, and that's great and everything. But
in the last season, there was a girl who was like a full-out stalker. She dated this guy, and then they broke up, and then I guess she found out that he was going on Love is Blind and somehow got on herself. And so when you go in the pods, you don't know who's on the other side, right? So she would like acted all surprised that the guy was there. Then like later it came out in the season that she knew, and it was just these people are dement, like they have problems.
They all come relatively from the same city, right? Like that's what the producers try to do. Yeah. So like some of them know each other cities. or like mutual friends, and so.
And I think they ask you. I think because it came out that they do ask you.
It's a huge interview that they do, and they have to do like psychological evaluations and all that kind of stuff. So.
It's.
I wonder if people don't pass this. Some people don't pass the psychological evaluations, and then the producers like, absolutely, we need to have that person on.
Yeah. Get all the ones that failed their psychological evaluation. Those are the ones that are coming on.
Yeah. Congratulations. Go find love.
Oh man.
Well, I think that's pretty good. That's 4 videos right there. It might not be a bad idea, like if people enjoyed this, like, and you have videos that you like to comment on, especially Love is Blind ones, send them our way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the most, I think, impactful portrayals of abortion dealing with a couple was on Grey's Anatomy. It was like really hard hitting. One of the main characters was dating a doctor, obviously, and she got pregnant, and she was like the most ambitious one in the hospital, and she immediately said she wanted an abortion. The guy did not want her to have an abortion, and they have this argument in the furnace room, and it's so poignant. And I think he's so passionate and compassionate as well at the same time. and just like really focuses on the fact that she's pregnant with the baby. It's a really powerful scene, and it's weird because Shonda Rhimes, the woman who created Grey's Anatomy, sits on the board of Planned Parenthood in Los Angeles. So she's done tons of shows, like she does Bridgerton and others, and you can really tell like where her views come from. But this specific scene, for some reason, did not portray, I think, what she was trying to portray. And I might have observational bias, so it'd be interesting to see what like the common reaction was. But to me, it was a very powerful scene where it showed that the humanity of the baby and how abortion was not the right choice.
Yeah, I think sometimes like pro-abortionists in secular media and what's the word I'm looking for? Not media, but in entertainment. Unless they make a caricature that basically doesn't exist anymore of pro-lifers, I think sometimes they go to things like this and they think that it's super effective for their side, but it does the exact opposite when they just show basically a scene that would be from a normal discussion in a normal everyday life, and they try to make the pro-lifers to look like, the evil anti-woman people, and I think it comes off very much the opposite.
Yeah, like in Juno, like I can't imagine that when the directors were doing Juno, they were like, "Oh, we're gonna like make this a pro-life film." It just like accidentally happened because they did portray the protesters outside the abortion clinic to be sort of wingnutty, like Jesus freaks kind of thing. But the fact that one of them said your baby has fingernails stuck with her, which is a true fact, and that's what made her leave. So, and have the baby. So it's just, it's interesting how even the most ardent pro-abortion directors or actresses or actors, when they portray this issue in the media and entertainment, it doesn't have the effect that I think they want it to have.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, on that note, we will leave you until the next podcast, which will be in 2 weeks. Make sure you stay tuned for that. Make sure you like us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Rumble, anywhere you get your podcasts, to make sure that you know when our next episode is out. And if you have any videos that you want us to comment on or play, definitely send it to us at info@itstartsrightnow.ca. And we'll see you next time. Talk to you soon.
Bye for now.